Joining me is Ross Greenwood, Sky News Business Editor and host of Business Now, weekdays on Sky News at 4:30. Ross, what caused this inflation?
Well, pretty basically, and that is that the price of goods are rising. Now, I can take you through some of those goods that are rising. The ordinary person actually knows. If you've been to a supermarket, if you've been shopping, if you've filled up your petrol tank, you know. In the past quarter to the end of March, the price of fuel was up by 11%. Now, since then, it has come back a little bit. But the price of beef, so steak, up by 7%, 7.5%. The price of soft drinks and juices, the things that ordinary people buy in their groceries, up more than 5%. Fruit, up by 5%. Even, and this is the basics of life, right? Even paper towel. So this is toilet paper. This is paper towel, up by 6.7%. So if the Reserve Bank and the government imagined that there was no inflation coming, they clearly have not been shopping. They are not living in the real world, which raises question marks about why, in fact, they're going to be forced to act now and play catch up, risking the economy when they could have actually been on top of this some 6 months ago.
Look, I just can't understand it, Ross. Like, I'm no financial whiz, but even if I thought it, and I'm not the only one, I know you were talking about it obviously as well, that the Reserve Bank is sitting there keeping this official interest rate at record lows for so long when everyone, the pet shop galah was saying, look, you've got to raise interest rates because inflation is coming. Explain to me why they didn't react.
Okay, so they've got a couple of parts of their mandate. One of those is to maintain financial stability. Now, it can now be argued that by not having moved much earlier on inflation, that they are risking financial stability. And the reason why I believe they're doing that is because if they have to play catch up, if they have to raise interest rates much faster, we're talking about now potentially 12 interest rate rises coming over the course of the next 18 months. To give you some idea of that, on a typical $800,000 mortgage over 30 years, a typical Australian with that mortgage will be paying $16,000 more per year after tax for that mortgage than what they are right now, if rates rise from 2 to 5%. Now, second thing as well, their other part of the mandate is full employment. And so as a result, they suddenly moved really the barometer on where full employment was. Previously, it was the low fours. They said, no, we think it's now got a 3 in front of it. They were driving the whole idea that as a result of that, you'd start to get wages growth. And they've been hanging out to see that wages growth. Now, I don't know whether they've been in a pub lately or spoken to a publican. You talk to any publican who's hiring people, and they will tell you that wages inflation is real. The labour shortage has meant that they've had to pay more for their staff. And so really, again, the Reserve Bank, I think, has not been living in the real world and ultimately as therefore being caught out as a result of it.
I know we're living in difficult times, right? Things have changed, COVID, all that sort of thing. But the Reserve Bank forecasts and the forecasts in the budget year after year after year have been wildly wrong. This is probably the worst of all. What will you do to a governor that came up with this stuff and then we're confronted with, inflation like this?
Well, it's not just what you do with the governor, but remember, even there, they have a problem. As a result, the deputy governor, who was supposed to actually take the place of Philip Lowe next year, he decided to leave to try and save the planet with Andrew Forrest and running his Fortescue Future Industry. So that's Guy Debelle. So, you'd see potentially, if you were actually that person, right, Guy Debelle, you'd sit there looking down the path of potentially 10 or 12 interest rate rises and say, do I want to be the Reserve Bank governor who does that? Remember, in his time as the governor, Philip Lowe has not moved interest rates, right? Interest rates haven't moved here for almost 8 years. And so really that is ultimately the one job you're supposed to do. Sure, they've printed a lot of money. Sure, they've bought back a lot of bonds, which are now underwater to the tune of potentially many tens of millions, billions of dollars. So the one part about this is financial stability. Where does that go if, as Jerome Powell, the chair of the US Federal Reserve, said last week, if they get the settings wrong, you risk a recession in the US economy? If they're talking openly about that, why not the Australian Reserve Bank? And part of the problem is they do talk a lot, but they really don't talk very frankly the way in which most people would like them to.
Well, I tell you what, 12 rate rises, and you're saying $16,000 on a typical mortgage, interest, extra repayments. There are a lot of people that bought on cheap money thinking, the interest rates will stay low for ages, which the Reserve Bank Governor, by the way, also was saying, that are going to really face tough times in the future. I would reckon, tell me if I'm wrong, that this is a nail in the government's coffin. People will look at this and think, you guys call yourself economic managers? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that what it is that this whole election campaign that they have said they're fighting this on their economic track record to manage the economy better. Now, you play it one of two ways. Either you still believe that, and even during the tough times, that they are still the better economic managers, or you sit there and look down the prospect of, sort of these 10, 12 interest rate rises that might be coming and say, well, where did that come from? And why is it that there's been all of this stimulus that's gone on for such a long period of time when arguably a lot of that should have been withdrawn, especially as you got that unemployment rate down towards 4%. And so I think it's important, but on the other side, Labor has to be held to account. And I know they're out talking about this today, but the fact is they have to be held to account for the ongoing spending that they are committing themselves to. Because right now, if interest rates are going up, that's putting your foot on the brake pretty hard. But if the government continues to spend in the way in which it is, that's effectively putting your foot on the accelerator. You can't and shouldn't be doing both things at the same time.
That's true. It sort of cuts both ways. You could say, oh, well, the Morrison government, look what you've done. Or you could say, given the problems, why would you risk Labor? That's what the government's hoping for now. The only hope, I think, is Scott. Ross Greenwood, thank you so much for your time.
Quite okay.